Welcome to this session of the PlantPure Summit 2016, co-sponsored by PlantPureFoods.com. Our guest is John Robbins. Mr. Robbins is a world-renowned author, plant-based advocate, and an eloquent spokesperson for a sane, ethical, and sustainable future. It's a real pleasure to have you with us, Mr. Robbins.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great. So could you tell us about your family background? I think it's a really interesting.
Well, what do you want me to tell you about that?
Oh, that you're, I think you know the story that that's sort of foundational to how you got into this world in terms of.
Well, okay. I think I know what you're talking about. I've told that story so many times, but in brief, my dad and my uncle were the founders of Baskin-Robbins 31 Flavors Ice Cream Company. And they owned it and they ran it, and it became the world's largest ice cream company. And my father, I'm his only son. He had two daughters, but he also had me. And he groomed me to succeed him. And he did not expect his daughters to ever work. This kind of old kind of thinking. Patriarchal thinking, and but the full weight of his expectations were on me. And I started at the age of 5, sweeping the floor in the factory and doing little things that a 5-year-old and then a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old could do. And he was training me to learn the business from the inside out. And I loved it. I really did. I loved ice cream. I was growing up in Southern California where the weather's hot. And ice cream is a delight. I loved the flavor of it. I loved inventing flavors. I had a major hand in inventing Jamocha almond fudge and pistachio almond and others. And I really did enjoy it greatly. But you know, I also came of age in the 60s. And as my own values began to emerge and I began to think more deeply about what was taking place in our world and my role in it and what my destiny might be on this earth, I began to think that inventing a 30-second flavor or expanding Baskin-Robbins worldwide just did not turn me on. It didn't speak to me. And in fact, I began to think about it in ways that were very difficult for my father to even entertain. When I was 19, my uncle, Bert Baskin, my dad's partner, and brother-in-law, co-owner of the company, died of a heart attack. He was only 54 years old. He was a very big man. He ate a lot of ice cream, and he died of a heart attack. And when that happened, I asked my dad, do you think there could be a connection between the amount of ice cream that my uncle would eat and his fatal heart attack? And my father said, no, Johnny, don't even think about that way. His ticker just got tired and stopped working. And the message on one level was, no, I don't think so. But on the subliminal level, the message was, don't ever ask that question again. You know, that's the taboo topic in my family. You know, John Bradshaw, the eminent psychologist, has talked about elephants in the room, taboo topics in families that can't be mentioned. Sometimes it's alcoholism or some kind of abuse or some shameful thing that's taking place that the family learns to kind of not tell anybody about. Well, in my family, ironically, the elephant in the room, the topic that we couldn't talk about was, could there be a connection between ice cream and health, or ice cream and disease more accurately? And so when I asked, could there be a connection between my uncle's death, his heart attack, and the amount of ice cream he'd eat, my dad was really flummoxed. And I began to see, well, of course, he can't consider that possibility. By that time, he had manufactured and sold more ice cream than any human being who had ever lived on this planet. To think that product might be harming people or undermining their health or have contributed to my uncle's death was just impossible for him. And I knew I needed to respect that and not force my questions on him. But I needed to ask those questions of myself and of life and of the authorities in the medical world that I could ascertain. And I began to think, you know, there really is a connection. I'm not saying an ice cream cone is going to kill anybody, But in fact, the more ice cream you eat, the more likely you are to have a heart attack. And that's a reality. And I didn't want to be part of a business. I didn't want to depend on income from a business that was undermining people's health. And if you're in the ice cream business, your business model is to get people to eat as much and buy as much ice cream as possible. So I began to feel a real ethical dilemma. And I want to emphasize, by the way, it's not just Baskin Robbins. It's ice cream. Ben and Jerry's. Ben Cohen was the co-founder, was for many years co-owner of Ben and Jerry's. He's a peace activist. He's a lovely man. He also was very overweight and ate a great deal of ice cream and had to undergo a quintuple bypass in his late 40s. When people eat too much ice cream, and I've come to the conclusion that almost any amount is too much, really, if you want to have optimum health. They undermine their health. They jeopardize their health. They jeopardize their cardiovascular system. And I chose then to walk away from Baskin Robbins and the money it represented. I told my father I didn't want to have a trust fund. I didn't want to have any dependence whatsoever on his financial achievements. This was a choice for integrity that I made. And it was a choice for my own ethical relationship to life. And it set me on a new path. Not the one he'd planned for me, not the one paved with ice cream and money, but I followed my own, as my family says it, my own rocky road, and eventually became an author and wrote books about the meat industry, the dairy industry, the animal products industry, and how their products are undermining the health of American people and the whole population of the world, really, because we're spreading our way of eating worldwide.
Well, I got to say that was a very courageous thing for you to do. To walk away from a business that was that lucrative and that would have ensured your financial security for the rest of your life. So morally speaking, I think that was an incredibly brave choice that you made. And
well, thank you. People sometimes have asked me, how could you walk away from that much financial security and into a life that had none? Well, the answer is I felt, ironically, more emotionally secure because I was not leading a false life. I was starting to be true to myself. I was trying to listen to my own inner guidance, to my own higher powers within myself. I think we all have higher powers within us that we can attune to, we can align with, we can form a relationship, get engaged with. And when we do that, our lives take on a higher vibration, a quality of consciousness, if you will, and a sense of purpose that is meaningful and profound and can guide us on. The other way, I probably would have been a very rich man, but I probably would have been a very unhealthy man, and I would not have been able to make the contributions to the lives of others that I have been able, and I'm very grateful to have been able to make.
So, and we're all grateful too for that, frankly. So thank you very much. But so when and why did you decide to adopt a vegan diet?
Well, I was a student at Berkeley in the 60s, actually, and I was involved in a lot of social action. I was involved in the protests against the war in Vietnam. I was very involved in the civil rights movement. I worked with Dr. King, marched with him in the South. Looked up to him greatly. And I also was involved in just the general movement to make our society more socially responsible. I didn't think greed was a legitimate criteria for a life. And I saw all around me, and certainly my parents' world, that greed was the central organizing principle of their decisions. So I thought, how do you live simply? How do you live simply so others may simply live? How do you eat simply so others may simply eat? How do you cause the least amount of damage or violence or harm to others in your life? And that would include in the way that you eat. And so I was asking those kinds of questions and looking for answers. And when I looked at my diet, I thought the diet that causes the least amount of harm, that is most ecologically responsible, the most earth-friendly, that contributes to the least amount of soil erosion and water pollution and water consumption, and as we've come to find out, greenhouse gas emissions, but I didn't know that then. And the diet that's most ecologically earth-friendly and also healthiest for our bodies, for our cardiovascular systems, for our immune systems, gives us the highest quality of life, the most vitality, all pointed to me in the same direction. Now, I wasn't sure where going down that path of that direction would lead fully, because it was not a direction many people were taking in those days. But I wanted to find out. So I felt like something of a pioneer. And my wife and I became vegans in the late 60s. And we really did want to see what's going to happen to our health. Is there a healthier way to do this? And is it possible to lower our ecological footprint and to live a life that doesn't cause unnecessary harm and brutality to animals? So those were the questions we were trying to answer with a vegan lifestyle.
So how did you sort of learn to be vegan then, if there was not much information about it out at the time? How did you find out about it?
Trial and error, emphasis on the error. We didn't have many guides, and we were doing things that we had never seen anyone else do. We were growing most of our own food, and both of us had grown up in the city, and neither of us had ever really grown anything before. So we didn't really know what we were doing, and we made some mistakes, some of which were difficult to deal with. But over time, learning from our mistakes and learning to make new mistakes, and therefore learn new things, we eventually we followed a macrobiotic diet for a while. We followed a more raw foods diet for a while. We experimented. We tried to find out what worked for our individual bodies at that phase of our lives. But our commitment to being vegans, or pure vegetarians as we thought of it, was pretty strong. I've always loved animals. I've always felt a connection to them. I've always felt that my connection to them is part of who I am as a human being. And I've always felt that what we're doing in industrial meat production, in factory farming, is a violation of the human-animal bond. We're treating these animals with such contempt, so much disdain for their basic urges, their basic needs, that if you want to be a person whose life is a statement of compassion, then and you see what's really being done in today's factory farms, and has been done now for decades, you just don't want to support it. So we were looking for the healthiest way to live to not support that.
So tell us about writing your first book, Diet for a New America.
Well, I felt called. I felt something in me stirred. You know, some of us have creative urges that never get expressed. And that's sometimes a source of sadness and grief, and maybe even of physical illness. When we don't live the talents we're born with, we don't develop them, we don't give the gifts that we're here to give. And it's difficult to be a writer in our society and make a living doing it. Very few people are able to do that. And I knew when I started to write the book, because it was my first book and I was an unknown person, that the likelihood of it ever being a source of revenue for our family was very low. But I really did feel inspired and called to write it. And my wife, Deo, felt the same way. And so she cleaned houses, and she sold water filters, and she worked 2 jobs. And I was still doing odd jobs while I was researching and writing the book. So we were barely getting by. You remember that I had foregone all connection to my family of origin's wealth. And that was serious. I really meant to live that all the way through, and have. So we were struggling, but that struggle seemed to make it all the more immediately urgent to write this book. because I felt this is what I was here on earth to do. And if I didn't do it, and when I would feel like it was too much and I'd pull back, I'd feel something start to collapse in my heart. I'd feel something dark start to take place in my mind. And I knew that's life telling me, no, John, stay with it. And I did. And I wrote the book, and to my amazement, it became a bestseller. And millions of people read it. And I received 60,000 letters from readers. These are actual letters. This was before we had email. This is the U.S. Post Office. And they all said variations of the same thing. And I saw that the message had hit a nerve, struck a nerve in people. It was speaking to something that was important in people's hearts and souls and lives. Their health, their spiritual connection to life, their sense of living a life that protects what we love rather than preys on it. And I felt really grateful and humbled to be able to be a spokesperson for a message that is as important as I think this is.
Well, that book has really become a landmark. There's no question about it. It's a huge epic moment, I think, in the development or the beginning of the modern sort of plant-based vegan movement. And so were you surprised by its success in the beginning, or?
Yeah, astounded, amazed. I was incredulous. I didn't expect that for a moment.
Did it happen?
And I was thrown off center a bit by it.
Was it an immediate success, or did it build slowly?
Well, it built rapidly. So within a year, my life had changed dramatically, and I was being invited to speak everywhere. And I was drawing very large crowds anywhere I went. And everybody who I would speak to a crowd of 300 people, and we would sell 300 books right after in the foyer outside the auditorium. We'd sell 300 books. I mean, everyone wanted one, and I'd sign each of them. And the crowds grew larger and larger over time. And I was on national shows, and all of this happened to somebody that wasn't expecting any of it, and really had never desired any of it. My goal was never to be a bestseller author. My goal was to live a life of purpose and meaning and service, and to do something that might be of value, hopefully would be of value to others. And that I got to do that at the level that this became was on one level quite shocking, and then at another level, deep inside me, there was a part of me that felt I had been prepared for this, that this was really what my destiny entailed, and that I should meet it. I should expand myself to meet it. I shouldn't shrink back and say, well, I'm not worthy of this. And although I had a lot of tendencies in that direction, but I need to overcome them in order to fulfill the role that I was being privileged to play.
Yeah, that was actually what I was going to ask you. You were suddenly catapulted, it seems, into the public eye in a very large way. That must have had a gigantic psychological, emotional, intellectual impact on you.
It did, and on my family. My dad, when I left the company, and also essentially rejected his life work. I mean, I said I didn't want any access to the money that he had spent his life, devoted his life to making. He felt rejected. I tried as best I could to do it in as respectful a way and as non-rejecting a way as I could. But he was angry. This isn't what he wanted. And he was used to getting what he wanted. He didn't deal with his anger real well. We weren't seeing each other very much. We weren't talking very much. And now I'm becoming famous, and everybody's saying to him, oh, you must be so proud of your son. Oh, his book is so great. And my dad at first was, I think he just didn't know what to do with all of this. But what had happened, and what really made this fascinating, was that his health had been deteriorating. I mentioned my uncle had died of a heart attack. My dad had a lot of problems. He had high blood pressure. He had diabetes. He had serious cardiovascular issues. It was shortly after the book was published, Diet for New America was published, he went to his cardiologist and was told that he was a very sick man and had only a few years left to live. But then the cardiologist said to him, if you're willing to make really major changes in the way you live, there might be a different outcome for you. And my father said, well, what are you talking about? What major changes? And the cardiologist handed him a copy of Diet for a New America and said, I think you should read this book. Now, the irony is my father, of course, knew that's the book his son had written. I had sent him a copy when it was first published, an autographed copy. He didn't read it. But this doctor did not know that the John Robbins, who'd written the book, was the son or related to the Irv Robbins, the famous Baskin Robbins owner, who was his patient. He just didn't know that. And my dad did not tell him. But he took the book home, and now he began to read it. I'm sure he read the copy the doctor gave him, not the copy I had sent him, because this is the one that had been blessed by the high priest of Western medicine now. And he began to make changes. And he began to get results. And in the next 2 years, he achieved major changes. His diabetes went into remission. He no longer needed to take insulin or even diabetic pills. His high blood pressure, for which he'd been taking a lot of pills and had been told he'd have to take those for the rest of his life, and those pills had really serious side effects, he no longer needed them, and his blood pressure normalized without any medication. He lost a lot of weight. His cholesterol numbers, his triglyceride numbers, all of his blood levels were improving dramatically. And he wrote me, and he said, Johnny, you're not going to believe what's happened. It's really incredible. It's unbelievable. It turns out you were right. And thus began a new chapter in his and my relationship, a chapter with a lot of connection, a lot of mutual respect. And I must say, for me, my dad became, well, he said he wasn't a card-carrying vegetarian, a phrase which implies that, to me, that in his mind, it was almost akin to being a communist. But he didn't eat any meat except when he went to fundraisers and it was served. He didn't ever order it at a restaurant. He didn't serve it. It wasn't served in his home. And he really did. He wouldn't eat any sugar. He stopped eating all ice cream. And he lived another 22 healthy years. And during that time, he and I began to have conversations that we never had before. And there really was a sense, I respect him a great deal. And you know, the fact that he was able to make these changes when he was so identified with the success he had achieved through selling ice cream speaks to me of courage, that he was willing to make a change like that. And I really respect him even more for that courage and for the ability to reconnect with me when I had disappointed him so much. More than I do for all his business achievements, prodigious as they were, because these were things of his heart. These were things of his that shows his character. And so my relationship to my dad, although it was troubled and in pretty precarious condition after I left, I made the decision I did to walk away, ended up in the long run being a thing of beauty. And I'm very grateful for that.
That's incredible. That's such a great story. And it's so wonderful that it worked out that way. I think the most important quality we can display as human beings is moral courage. And I think it took an enormous amount of moral courage for your father to reach out to you.
Yes.
After that experience, and to admit that he had been wrong and that you had been right. I mean, there's a lot of people that just would never have done that.
You are so right about that. And I was shocked. I didn't expect my dad to do that. But, you know, his own health changed so dramatically. And so many people are experiencing this. And that's why the work that we're doing here matters, is because there are people who are suffering from diseases, food-based diseases, really, diseases caused by the food they're eating. And if they shift the food they're eating to a healthier direction and eat more fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes and seeds and nuts, and stop eating the animal fats and the animal products and the processed foods, the hyper-processed foods. Do you know that over 60% of the calories in the American diet today come from ultra-processed foods? And a very high percentage of the rest come from meats and dairy products. I mean, what is left from the good foods? It's actually, the standard American diet is seriously sad. And the good news, though, is that when we change, the results we get, like the ones my dad got, are so thrilling. They're so spectacular. They're so dramatic. They're so good. They're so life-affirming. We feel vital. We feel vibrant. We feel alive. We're glad to wake up in the morning. We sleep better. Our moods improve. We're more creative. We're more competent at work. Our relationships can grow. So many things are fed when we're fed well. And when the foods that we choose are in alignment with our best interests and our well-being, it's a phenomenal thing. And that these same food choices that give us the most health also are kindest to the animals, also are the most earth-friendly, also have the lowest ecological footprint, also contribute to the fewest amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. This is a powerful, powerful combination of realities that when we bring our lives into alignment with that, and wow, I think it's an amazing thing to see and do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, of course. And it seems to me that you touched on, what I like to sort of call the strategic triad of the plant-based nutrition, which is A, it's good for your health. B, it's good for the environment. C, it's the more humanitarian way to live. And those three things, what's great is just by changing your diet to a plant-based diet, you're addressing all three of those things.
On the other hand, people will say, well, yeah, but I like meat, which they like the taste of it. They enjoy it. They may be even addicted to it, but they love it. And they don't want to give it up. And so we have these arguments, we have these realities, but they're people are struggling. And there's tension here. Not for you and I. We've made our decisions, we're living them, we feel overjoyed with that. But for a lot of people, that's the fact that those things are true, that you just said are true, that's not a source of joy to them. That's a source of guilt. That's a source of confusion, because there's a tension there between that and the way they're living, and what they like to eat, and what's convenient, and what they've come to appreciate and culturally connect with others around. So it's an interesting situation, and one of the things I want people to know is that when you eat a healthier diet, not only do you lower your disease risk and all the things that I'm sure other speakers are talking about at great length in this summit, but you feel better, and all of your senses become more acute, and your taste buds work better. Your body functions at a higher level, and that includes your salivary glands and your digestive process. So what happens is your taste buds change, and you begin to enjoy tastes that otherwise would seem boring or bland to you, because your taste buds become more sensitive. And now something like broccoli or a simple baked potato tastes really great. And you don't have to smother it with some kind of meat gravy or butter. And in fact, believe it or not, it tastes better now, simply eaten, than it would otherwise with all of those additions. This is the secret that people don't talk about a lot. If you're a hedonist, if you want to maximize the amount of pleasure in your life, if that's your criteria, then go vegan or become vegan-esque. Choose a healthy diet, because health is pleasure and sickness is not.
A very stark but very eloquent way to put it, I must say. And I got to tell you that one of my favorite foods is just a plain old baked potato. You know, I mean, there's nothing quite like it. They're great, and
they are. You know, and when I find that too, though I taste them now, and so I know that those potatoes are fresh and they're good. Those are grown and they'll be bred probably for mass production, and they don't taste very good. They're just holders for all these other sauces and things. And then you learn which are the potatoes that you really like, and you start to become more discerning, and you become something of an aficionado of excellent food. I think that's a lovely thing to be an aficionado of.
That's another very good, very well put. So you've been such a tremendous influence on so many people in the world and so many other figures. And you talked about some of the earlier influences on you. Dr. King is a great example. What about some of the other diet scientists that have published works? People like Caldwell Esselstyn and Colin Campbell and so forth. Have they influenced you in any way?
Oh, very much so. Colin Campbell, his work is just fabulous, and he's a wonderful human being. I have the pleasure of thinking of him as a friend as well as a colleague, somebody I admire greatly. The same is true for Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. I've also gotten to know very well Dr. Dean Ornish. These are people who, to me, are the icons of the food movement. They are the leading lights. They've done the trouble of doing the research and gone to the great trouble of doing that research in an exhaustive and scrupulous way, so that it's scientifically validated. And that's why the Ornish program is now covered by Medicare and most major insurance companies. That's why so many people are seeing that this passes the test of serious research techniques. And I'm so grateful to them for having the diligence and doing that sometimes tedious work, because it ends up proving something for all of us.
So how far has the plant-based movement come since you started now?
Oh, it's come so far, you know. When I started, when I wrote Diet for New America, for example, in the mid-'80s, very, very, very few people in the United States had ever heard the word vegan. Now, former President Bill Clinton is a vegan, as is his daughter Chelsea. Al Gore, former vice president, is a vegan. I mention these people not because I want to endorse their politics, but because they are very, very prominent people. And my point is that we have many celebrities, in athletes, Olympic athletes, professional athletes, at the highest levels of accomplishment, endorsing it and living by a vegan diet. This is a real sea shift. In the 80s, organic food was really hard to come by. There weren't really health food stores. There might be a few stores here and there that sold a lot of vitamins, but there weren't anything like what we have in Whole Foods. And now Walmart is selling a lot of organic foods. I mean, it's become mainstream. And I think we will see increasingly that making healthy food choices and making choices that are socially responsible and ecologically responsible and take into account the impact on animals and the earth will become increasingly trendy. Now, I know that when things become trendy, that's a bit shallow, and that doesn't mean they'll last. But this one will, because it's becoming trendy as a result of the reality of how important it is. Sometimes things become trendy just because some celebrity does them and others ape them, imitate them. But this is very different than that. This has roots in the very depths of who we are as human beings and what we must do to survive on this planet.
So where do you see the movement in 10 or 12 years, 10 or 15 years?
Well, sometimes people who are vegan activists will want the number of vegans to increase. And that's how they'll measure the success of the movement. I'm a little different on that. And I ask, in 10 or 12 years, what do you think the odds are that half the people in the country would be vegans? I think those odds realistically are zero. If they're not zero, they're close. But what are the odds that in that many number of years, half the meals eaten in the country would be vegan? I think that's a realistic goal. I think that is doable. I think that's achievable. I think we could even surpass that. So I'm not as interested in the number of people who identify as vegans and are exclusively vegans. I use words like vegan-esque or plant-based or plant-strong. Because I don't want people to feel excluded if they want to eat some animal products. I want us all to eat less. And as we all eat less, more of us will eat none. But what will happen is we'll be a healthier people. Our impact on the environment will be a much more positive one. And our relationship to animals will start to improve, and we will start to remember that connection with the web of life, that in forgetting, we've become more predators and less protectors of the planet.
That's another very well put statement. What about America's healthcare system today? What do you think are the biggest problems with our healthcare system?
Oh my God, so many. Costs are out of control, completely out of control. And you know, there's very little, you hear all this conversation about Obamacare and who should pay, and that's usually about who should pay. But I hear far too little conversation about the one thing that could bring the cost way down and make us much healthier people. And that is healthier food choices and government policies that support healthier food policies. Right now, the USDA and every health authority is telling us to eat more fruits and vegetables. But the USDA is spending billions every year subsidizing GMO corn and GMO soy that then are fed to animals, which lowers the price. That subsidization of those feed crops lowers the price to the public of meats and dairy products. And the USDA is spending nothing to subsidize the production of fruits and vegetables, the foods they are telling us, and every health authority is telling us we should be eating more of. So what sense does it make for us as taxpayers to be subsidizing the foods that are driving up healthcare costs and making us sick and fat? And shouldn't we, as taxpayers, be subsidizing the foods that are consistent with our health and well-being? I think we can change that. I hope that we do. It's kind of low-hanging fruit, really. It's right there to change. There are people that don't want it to change. The people that are profiting from the sale of meats and dairy products and ultra-processed foods that derive their ingredients from GMO corn, like the high fructose corn syrup that's in it, and GMO soy, like all the processed, it's called vegetable oils that are used in them. But that's okay. The tobacco industry didn't want to see us lower our smoking rates. There's other things they can do with their land than grow tobacco. There's other things that these people could do to make a good living by producing products that are good for people.
So talk about some of your later books. What's the latest book that you have out?
Well, I'm actually at the moment less writing books and more involved with the Food Revolution Network. It's an online community of activism and support and education. We have now over 350,000 members. I co-founded it with my son, Ocean. He's the CEO, I'm the president. We run it together. I get to work with him on it very, very closely, and I love doing that. And we are helping people learn, helping people take action in their lives on behalf of what they love, and including their own health. And it's very exciting. It's a new world to do this online. In the past, we had newspapers, and colleges were central institutions in our cultures. But increasingly, we know newspapers are receding online. Those who are making it online are succeeding. But that's the direction we're going in our educational realities too. Online courses are becoming much more popular than going to brick and mortar schools, just as people are buying from online sources their books rather than brick and mortar stores. There are some downsides to these developments and shadows to them, but they are happening. And I think we should ride the horse in the direction it's going. And this is the horse that we're riding right now, is internet education. And it's the Food Revolution Network. People can find out about it at foodrevolution.org. We have a lot of projects, a lot of programs, and a lot of offerings that I think are valuable.
Well, I strongly suspect that they're valuable, and that's simply because just the most sidelong glance back at your career shows how much you've done and what a difference you've made and what kind of moral courage it took to take the steps that you did and to continue to walk that walk all these years. So I really want to thank you for doing that, and thank you for being part of the summit. It's been a real tremendous honor talking to you.
Well, thank you, Lee. And I want to say it's an honor to be part of it, to be involved with Colin Campbell and his work and his staff and the people that have been drawn to his work. And it's really a privilege for both of us, I think, to do this kind of work, to do something that we know is of value to others. The Buddhists call it right livelihood. To be able to do work that truly contributes to the well-being of other human beings and the well-being of really the whole Earth community, to me, is spectacular. I love it, and I love doing it with people like you.
Thank you very much again, and thanks everybody for watching. And if you're interested in finding out how we're doing to create a PlantPure world, visit us at our website at plantpurenation.com. Thanks again, Mr. Robbins. Thank you.
Thank you.